Hello again, friends. Here we are, enjoying us some vampires, fighting the twilight, as one could say. And yes, this is my cringe-locked Iron Man, so I can't leave or do anything else until I say something cringe, and thankfully, I'm now unlocked and completely free to do as I please. So, with that out of the way, it's time for today's topic. Time for the Skitzo Rant. I'm excited. This is my final week of Wagey before I am free from my KG. And now, we're gonna talk about power creep. Power creep. Ooh. So, yum yum yum. Anyways, yeah, this and more to you brought when I start streaming. Maybe I'll make a preemptive stream just so people know. But yes, power creep. So what is power creep well, let's define power creep, right? So power creep is when the player's power increases and the monsters don't. So legacy content becomes trivial, removes the difficulty of things, and generally just removes the sense of accomplishment of a lot of old goals, right? This idiot closed the door. Why would you do that, you ass? I should get a herb sack too when I'm doing this, but yeah, whatever. Boop. Doo-doo-doo, and I'm gonna report this guy just for fun before I talk. Hehe. I'm not really gonna do that. But anyways, onto the more serious stuff after pretending. That's too cringe I've gotten away with thus far. You guys are letting me slack. Not allowed to post so much cringe, you know? Gotta be careful when clicking around. Okay. Anyways. So, why is power creep such a bad thing though, right? Shouldn't we keep the game new and fresh? And certainly I do agree there is some element of that, but I think there's a type of power creep people don't often talk about, and, you know, the things on here I like to talk about are the stuff people generally don't want to talk about. But there's the type of power creep that doesn't actually involve the game or changes to it, which is just players' own innovation and player skill increasing. As people get better at the game, power creep is a natural result. Things are not as difficult as they were 20 years ago. And just in general, even if the settings don't change, just the strategies and, you know, humans are advancing constantly. So, throughout the arrow of time, as one would say, people are going to naturally just get better at things, get more efficient, and the metas and everything else is going to change now. So, what does that really mean, though, in essence? So, like, what is power creep then if, you know, the metas for everything are constantly being adapted, that it doesn't really matter so much what the gameplay is about, it's just power will naturally increase just because people are going to get better. So, does that mean that the game needs to be conditionally ramped up over time so it's more and more difficult to meet players' expectations and keep the game feeling fresh? Or should we release new challenges instead of worrying about old ones? There's a few ways you can handle it, and there's a few ways people have handled it throughout the ages, right? And so when someone says power creep in RuneScape, they're not talking about this grandiose, you know, game design philosophy sort of ordeal, right? They're talking about releasing stuff that may potentially break elements of the game via power. Something like, oh, I don't know, Soul Split. That's a pretty good example, right? Just that level of power, you know, takes the game from being very old school and sort of focused to turning into, you know, this hyper modern, you know, AFK RS3 almost simulator, right? And so, you know, we can talk about elements like this, like I just got one of these, first one on the account, yippee-ki-yay, a little bit ago, but I think I got it like within 18 kills or something here, and I've just been chilling. Yeah. I unlocked this, by the way, to do the vampire boss, says the father, and then I just have kept it rolling since. I even extended them. I like it so much because it's so chill. And I'm going to need a lot of these going forward for PVM. This place is kind of packed now, though. Yeah, there's way too many nerds here. We'll go here. Maybe this will be better. I don't want to fight over my AFK zombie or vampire spot. That's like too much effort. There we go. See, I transferred and suddenly I've got 3 guys looking to... Oh, we won't say that. This is YouTube. Let's just let it be known I was about to say the 3rd cringe thing of the video, and I'm sure you can figure it out. You're a creative bunch. But yeah, so in essence, where is the line that player power in RuneScape it increases to a point where it won't be fun or interesting? And hear me out on this, okay? I'm gonna say stuff now that, you know, I think the average person might say is cringe, and that's just gonna be it. I don't think there is a line, realistically, where you can draw a line in the sand and say players are too powerful at this point. Like, I can't draw a line across my screen and say, okay, now if I can do this much damage, or if I can do this much healing, this much X, Y, and Z, players have gone too far in this game. I don't actually think power creep is a problem. The reason old school RuneScape failed, in my opinion, was because of EOC and the changing of the combat system. I think if you keep the same combat system, you can scale this up quite a lot. I mean, you could tweak numbers, like you could add 120 HP if you really felt like it, just for PvP balancing or whatever, but as far as like gameplay changing elements like self-sustain and all of that, if you're talking about the vast majority of the player base, i.e. the player base that's using mains, alts are so much more powerful than any sort of potential power creep anyone or any item or anything in this game has ever been released or ever even come close to. Like, having an ult that can just fair use supplies like at God Wars, or like, you know, all of the sort of altscape methods you can use to PVM certain bosses, or like those like pet boosting Discord shenanigans people are doing, like that takes the game onto another level as far as potential for potential for power creep, right? Like Jagex can never release anything that's going to be as powerful as ults. Like Pacquiacs, all of that, RS, like you could take RS3 mechanics and still having an ult, probably going to be more powerful than everything involved, especially in old school, where, you know, if you're flicking, if you're trying to conserve resources, you can pretty much go for extended periods of time already. So, like, self-sustain for most content in the game is virtually infinite if you can consider having an ult. Now, that's just part of what going forward and what player skill is about, so I don't even think Soul Split would be that big of a deal in old school. I'm gonna be honest. It would be amazing, and like it would invalidate a lot of this newer content like Blood Shards, like a lot of this self-healing, and it would remove a lot of the skill of the game. It probably shouldn't work in places like the Inferno, but, you know, as far as just generally bossing, it compared to just like instance content and raids, it's not as big of a deal. And like, you know, so scaling raids like TOA or individual challenges are the right way to increase the difficulty of the game and progress the game further and give you a place to use your new gear. So just because of methods people have developed over, you know, the aeons, like, I don't really think it's such an issue that, you know, they could release new content that increases your X damage or gives you some minor self-sustain, or some unique options. For instance, costly self-sustain like this thing. Even though I'm an Iron Man, I don't care. Like, this is my first one, obviously, but I'm happy about it. I'm gonna wreck Cerberus with this, dude. Gonna bring, like, no food, just an inventory of prayer pots. Just whacking it with an arc light. Oh, it's gonna be glorious when I get to there in a long time. That's future plans. We're focusing on power creep. So, in my opinion, the point of the game in which power creep will ruin it, I don't think exists for old school RuneScape. What I think the threat to old school RuneScape is, as far as releasing new item, is making the meta unfun or releasing unfun abilities into the game, or unfun tactics. Like what with the new prayer book and, you know, locator orbing down to 1 HP and all of that shenanigans. Like, I think that things like that, or changes in the core mechanics of RuneScape, are going to be far more problematic. Like, making it so you can't flick on the new prayer book, I think is a good thing in general. I actually like that, just because it takes a load of off my mind. I don't have to be autistic about things if I'm like wanting to get one more kill or finish this kill off of X prayer or whatever. Like, it just removes that ability. I just have to accept it and move on. Which I kind of like that as just a general gameplay design feature, although being able to, you know, get that kill when you shouldn't have also makes you feel good, so it really depends. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can take it, and, you know, there's no really right answer to a lot of these questions as far as like the basic game design and things, but I think priority number one should be the things that in the game that are fun should stay the things that remain fun, and then if you're going to introduce new systems or new gear, do not make it so it's not fun to play. You know, it still has to have that old school vibe to it and that old school feeling, even if it's not particularly old school anymore. Like, the new prayer book is going to like boost the max hit of a twisted bow with full Missouri by like +6 at most places. That's a lot of damage, but I don't think it's going to be the hugest of deals, even though it's going to smash a lot of old content as far as power creep goes, just because, you know, people are going to adapt, new metas are going to form, and it's going to change things, and then when Jagex releases new content, they have a greater scope of potential mechanics they can introduce because they can scale players up more and more and more. And like, power creep is inevitable, and I do like exploring other avenues than just make number go higher, because obviously at some point you hit, you know, ridiculous amounts of damage, right? Like, World of Warcraft had this problem with like mega damage, you know, potential ideas where they were going to scale like the damage into new numbers, and Diablo 3 has this same issue where you're like hitting for trillions. That's not going to happen in old school RuneScape, just mathematically. The systems in place now just don't make it possible to where we're considering hitting for trillions. Like, you can't get enough strength on gear in too many numbers. You have so much room to grow power by, you know, a couple of extra damage points. Unless they start adding like things that multiply your damage and then critical damage and then add in extra damage multipliers on top of that, that would be the kind of things I would be worried about. Like, damage multipliers are much more scary to me from a power creep perspective than just adding, you know, 6 max hits or whatever. Even though percentage-wise that's a pretty big increase, it's still not overwhelming in a sense, if you get my drift. So in reality, where should the power in the future come from then? And I think currently it's pretty fine, as long as they don't make it not fun. It should just be from, like, you know, increasing your max hit by a little bit, increasing your accuracy, because no one likes noodling. Like, let's be fair here. I think, you know, going forward, if we increase the accuracy of all players by a whole lot, that wouldn't be the worst thing to go for as far as power creep. Rather than, you know, this +6 mass hits we've got now, we can increase the, you know, average U-logs, or increase the accuracy of a lot of gear, or like add new buffs to like the Slayer helm or something like that. There's like a million different ways where you can take it where you're not going to like destroy the mechanics of the video game. I think the wrong thing is stuff like the locator orb spam, or some new mechanic where you have to, like, you know, juggle like all sorts of different factors and try and make it work. Like, if you had some sort of a priority system, or like forcing same weapon swaps to min-max melee DPS, or a lot of mechanics like that, things that would just make it, you know, much more click intensive and much, you know, unnecessarily complicated, we'll say. So that would be my biggest fear, is going forward Jagex adds unnecessary complication to the old school RuneScape combat. It should still be simple, and like the counting mechanics on a lot of bosses, while tedious, are a good enough difficulty sync for most players. And obviously things like the Inferno and the higher tier challenges are great, and they can certainly consider adding a new one. I wouldn't be opposed to that, and maybe including unique and interesting mechanics in that. But, you know, as far as like trying to shape the game around, I'm getting so much Runite ore, Jesus. As much as, you know, trying to shape the game, or say that, like, you know, X, Y, and Z potential is going to ruin the game. I think at this point we can accept, after Torva, after Masori, after all of these just straight gear upgrades in a row, that it's not going to ruin the game so much if you have like an excess of power in that regard, but it is going to ruin the game if you like introduce if you introduce EOC type mechanics into the game going forward. So at least that's how I feel about it, and I feel like most of the development currently is healthy. So And as far as like potential things that could happen that are good ideas, again, I'm a big fan of Slayer, so anything that buffs the Slayer helmet, anything that buffs prayer in general, because we've gotten more prayer drain now, so we've lost a bit of like sustain and that sort of longing power. So with the new spellbook, obviously, because I'm assuming at most places that spellbook is going to be the one people use, in which case, you know, hopefully we add some like increased methods for prayer, maybe even something that allows us to recover prayer besides like that isn't tied to the special attack bar, you know, and also isn't annoying to use. Something like a Falador shield upgrade to some other item like that does something similar to a Falador shield, maybe on a large timer. Maybe by playing well, not getting hit for X amount of time, you can, you know, X amount of time in combat, let's say. So you flick everything perfectly, that item gets, you know, reduced and you get more prayer. And obviously on Slayer, that item would be like something that might reduce the amount of prayer pots that you need to waste, say on basic tasks like Greater Demons or something like that. I feel like that could be a good step forward as far as continuing in additional items to the game, additional power creep, and then obviously just, you know, maybe upgrades to these prayers or other prayers in the game now that we've got the new prayer book. Mage is looking good. If we talk about the individual combat styles, I guess that's a good way to round everything out too. Is Mage is looking really good with Tunic and Shadow. I've never used it because my main quit before that became a thing, but looks very pog, must say, very strong. So, you know, I definitely will be rushing QA on the Iron Man if I get it or not early. Who knows? Because there's a bunch of like. I'm still unsure of exactly what path I'm going to take through PVM as I negotiate into it. I'm thinking Combat Diaries starting off just to get them to a decent point after my Diary Cape. And once I start PVM at like 87 Slayer. And then we'll see where I end up or where I go. There's a whole bunch of potential ways to take it. But yeah, I'm just a grindin' these days, you know. And so Melee, I think, is still really good. It's got random special attacks, and I think you could add a little bit more variety in special attack weapons, especially now with Lightbringer synergy in the game. Stuff like that is really unique and interesting, so I definitely am excited to get a Lightbringer, just even for my Ancient Mace specs while doing, you know, Proselyte AFK prayer. Like, that to me seems very hype. So I'm looking forward to getting one of those pretty soon. And as for ranged is always very strong. Green spell, very good. Now with the new, green prayer, I mean, very good. But now, rigor. But now with the new prayer book, I'm not sure if ranged might need a buff in comparison to keep up with melee mage, because it only really had rigor going for it, and I haven't done the math on everything and compared and contrasted it, but that's my initial figures. Hopefully, but considering Twisted Bow just got a +6 max hit boost with the new prayer over rigor, I'm assuming they've already done the math, and yeah, everything sounds fine. I would have to like DPS calc out everything, and since it's not finalized yet, I haven't done that, and I'm an Iron Meme. It's going to take me a long time to get to the point where I'm like worried about something like max hits with Missouri, at least for a little while. Hopefully I get there relatively quickly. If I get there at all, I might just max the account and then get bored. I might go play Path of Exile or something. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but, you know, that's at least my thoughts on power creep. And that was a very cringe bit of content. I hope you like the cringe. I've been embracing the cringe now as I move forward, and that is my path forward, the path of cringe. I did it again. Forgive me. I know you won't. Bye, friends.